On the 25th of October, 1997, Chris Farley walks out onto the Saturday Night Live stage for the last time. He is 33 years old. He has just left a rehab clinic. He was supposed to bring a sober companion with him to the show. He arrives alone, and he arrives already drinking. What happens over the next 90 minutes is one of the most uncomfortable things in the history of American television. Not because it's bad, because it's heartbreaking. His opening monologue lasts 28 seconds. 28 seconds. In that time, he sweats through his shirt. He struggles to breathe. He slurs a line about responsibility. And when he slurs it, when the word comes out wrong, you can see Chris Rock standing just off camera, checking his cue. Because Lorne Michaels has authorized Rock to step in and take over if Farley can't finish. There are oxygen tanks positioned just outside the camera's frame, because nobody is sure he's going to make it through the broadcast. He makes it through. But watching it back, everyone who was there says the same thing. Watching it live, you knew he was going to die. Over the next 54 days, Chris Farley will prove them right. This is not a story about a comedian who burned out. It is a story about a boy who needed so desperately to be loved that he turned himself into a punchline and kept going long after the joke stopped being funny. Chris Farley is born on the 15th of February, 1964, in Madison, Wisconsin. His father is a big man, a dominant presence, the kind of father whose approval reshapes a child's entire understanding of what matters in the world. And Chris discovers very early, that the single most golden feeling available to him is making his father laugh. Not a trophy, not a grade, not a compliment from a teacher. His father's laugh. That discovery will define everything that follows. But the world outside the Farley home is less forgiving. Chris is overweight as a child, and children are not kind about it. His mother is called into school by the nuns to be told that the other students are laughing at Christopher. Not with him, at him. Girls do the same. A girlfriend, he clearly cares about the raven-haired, one-eyed pixie who stole America's heart, as he describes her with painful self-awareness, calls him fatso. He laughs it off in interviews. He always laughs it off. That's the whole point, because Chris Farley develops a strategy for surviving a world that mocks him. He decides to be the one doing the mocking. He ridicules himself before anyone else gets the chance. It gets him attention. It gets him friends. It gets him a place where he can exist without being destroyed. But the people who actually know him, who get close enough to see past the performance, describe someone completely different underneath. One of the most sensitive people you would ever meet. Someone you could hurt with just a word or two, if you chose to. He goes to fat camp with his father, both of them together, father and son, trying to be smaller. His father hates it. All they talk about is their feelings. Chris describes it doing his father's voice, building to a rage with the kind of affection that contains an entire childhood. He stays big. He plays football instead. Number 57, defensive lineman, 5'9" and 230 pounds. He's actually good. Good enough that he believes for a while that this might be the thing. The version of himself that doesn't require being the joke. But in his senior year, he makes an honest assessment. He is not professional football big. That door closes, and something else opens. Chris Farley tries stand-up comedy and fails. He is honest about why. Too dumb to come up with his own material, he says. Can't think fast enough, tries to play off the audience, but can't find the rhythm of it. What he can do, what he has always been able to do, is physically inhabit something. Take his body, his size, his presence, and weaponize it. Not in the way that makes people wince, in the way that makes them unable to look away. At 23, he joins Second City in Chicago, the famous improv theater that has produced more comedy talent per square foot than almost any institution in American history. And it is here that Chris Farley becomes Chris Farley. He develops a character, a motivational speaker, middle-aged, divorced, financially ruined, bellowing desperately at teenagers who don't care. He calls him Matt Foley, named after a Catholic priest who is also his friend. My name is Matt Foley, and I am a motivational speaker. I am 35 years old, I am divorced, and I live in a van down by the river. The audience at Second City loves it, not because it is outrageous, because it is somehow deeply, uncomfortably human, this man screaming about failure with a passion that suggests he has personally felt every word of it. Lorne Michaels sees Farley perform at Second City and describes the experience simply. Genuinely, overwhelmingly, stop you in your tracks funny. In 1990, Chris Farley is hired for Saturday Night Live. He arrives in full altar boy mode, yes sirs, and bright-eyed alertness and desperate, transparent need to please. He joins a cast that includes Adam Sandler, David Spade, and Chris Rock, all of them young, all of them hungry, all of them competing for the same limited amount of space. In this environment, Chris needs to stand out, so he does what he has always done. He makes himself the spectacle. He throws himself into sketches with an abandon that is thrilling and slightly terrifying to watch. He falls off furniture. He destroys props. He escalates every scene until it becomes something you cannot look away from. Adam Sandler, who works alongside him for years, says that when Farley walked into a room, that was it. Full stop. The room belonged to him. His first defining moment arrives on the 27th of October, 1990. In a sketch parodying the Chippendales male dance troupe, Chris Farley auditions for a spot alongside Patrick Swayze. Two men, one of them one of the most physically beautiful people in Hollywood at that time, the other built like a defensive lineman who lives on cheeseburgers, and Farley pulls his shirt off. There is a moment, watch it back, where something crosses his face, a fraction of a second of hesitation. He knows what is coming. He knows that part of what makes this funny is his body. Not just his timing, not just his commitment, but the simple visual fact of him, and he does it anyway. The audience explodes. Chris Rock, reflecting on that moment years later, says it clearly. There is no comedic twist in that sketch. The laugh is coming from the contrast between the two men's bodies. And as funny as that moment is, as many doors as it opens for Farley, something happens right then that starts to close other doors. The world decides what Chris Farley is for, and it becomes increasingly difficult for him to be anything else. He doubles down. He keeps falling. He keeps destroying things. He keeps making his body the joke because the reaction is undeniable. And the reaction is what he has always been chasing. But backstage, between the laughs, he asks his friends the same question over and over. Am I funny? Am I actually funny? There is a story from around this period that tells you everything. Chris Farley meets a 10-year-old girl at an event. She is standing by the dessert table, a little self-conscious, a little unsure of herself. Farley notices. He walks over, picks up a brownie, shoves it in his mouth, then, maintaining complete eye contact, takes 10 more brownies and starts eating and eating until she is laughing so hard she can barely stand up. He does it because he recognizes something in her. He sees the little kid who feels wrong in their own body, who isn't sure where they fit, and he knows exactly what to do. This is the other Chris Farley, the one underneath the spectacle, the one his friends describe when they stop talking about the performances and start talking about the person. But the performance and the person have become almost impossible to separate. After his first season at SNL, he reflects that he has been taking his clothes off at parties and making a fool of himself because he thinks people will like him. He has learned to do it pretty well. Too well, then the spiral begins properly. After that first season, he goes on a bender in his apartment, rips apart the drawers. Everything ends up on the floor. His parents put him into rehab for the first time. He gets clean, returns to SNL. Then 90 days into his second season, after a bad read-through where the writers haven't included him in enough material, he makes a decision. They didn't write me into the show. So I did 5 bags of heroin. And the cycle begins. Binge. Leave. Get clean. Return. Binge. Leave. Over 5 seasons at Saturday Night Live, Chris Farley will repeat this cycle more times than anyone around him can count. 11 rehab stays by some accounts, 17 by others. The exact number depends on who is counting, and nobody really wants to keep score. There is a reason the heroin becomes part of the story. Less than 4 years before Chris Farley joins Saturday Night Live, John Belushi dies of a drug overdose in a bungalow at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, aged 33. The cause is a speedball, cocaine, and heroin combined. Chris Farley is the one person who was supposed to learn from this and doesn't. Belushi is his obsession, his hero, his North Star. He studies Belushi the way other people study scripture. He wears Belushi's actual clothes from the SNL wardrobe. He copies Belushi's physical comedy, his explosiveness, his total unwillingness to hold anything back, and he copies something else. He copies Belushi's drug use, not because he doesn't know what it cost Belushi, but because, in some part of his thinking, it is what you have to do. It is what being that kind of comedian requires. Jim Belushi, John's brother, eventually confronts him, sits him down, tells him directly what he is doing to himself. He kept going on about John. I said, I know, he was beautiful, he was talented. I said, you've got to stop chasing him, Chris. You can't follow his track. The guy did drugs. He's dead. Chris nods. Chris agrees. Chris goes back to confession the next day and starts again because that is the other piece of this. Chris Farley is a devout Catholic. Has been his whole life. And he has developed a private theology around his addiction, one where confession functions as a kind of reset button. He sins, he confesses, the slate is wiped clean, and he can begin again. The priest who hears many of those confessions is Father Matt Foley, the man Chris named his most famous character after. Father Foley describes Chris as someone who always wanted to ask about God, whose biggest questions always circled back to his struggles with evil, with his own compulsions. Drugs were Satan to Chris, and Satan kept winning. In 1995, Chris Farley leaves Saturday Night Live and goes to make movies. Tommy Boy is the first, a physical comedy about a bumbling heir trying to save his father's company. Farley plays the bumbling heir. The reviews are mixed, the box office is solid, and by every account from people around him at the time, Chris is clean for most of the production. He finds something in Tommy Boy that he cannot always find in the sketch comedy chaos of SNL structure, a schedule, something to be responsible to. He goes to his priest every night. It functions as his version of a recovery program, informal and imperfect, but working. Then comes the offer that should change everything. DreamWorks is developing an animated film about a big, lonely, misunderstood ogre who just wants to be left alone in his swamp. They want Chris Farley to voice him. He records 80 to 90% of the dialogue, and if you can find any of the surviving recordings, you can hear something extraordinary. Farley bringing a raw, emotional honesty to this character that is completely unexpected. The ogre's loneliness, his need for connection, his frustration at being judged before anyone has bothered to know him. People see me and they go, "Help! A big, stupid, stinky, smelly, ugly ogre." They judge me before they even know me. He never finishes the recording. The performance is incomplete when he dies. The role eventually goes to Mike Myers, and the film becomes one of the most successful animated movies ever made. But the recordings of Chris Farley as Shrek exist, and they are something, because what he brings to that character is not performance. It is autobiography. On the 25th of October, 1997, with 54 days left to live, Chris Farley hosts Saturday Night Live. He has coronary artery disease. The blockages in his coronary arteries are up to 90%. He could have a cardiac event at any moment. The people around him know this. The medical staff on site know this. Lorne Michaels knows this. The show goes ahead. The oxygen tanks are positioned just outside camera range. Chris Rock is on standby to take over the monologue if Farley collapses. And when the broadcast begins and Farley walks out for his 28-second opening, sweating, breathing too hard, slurring his words, everyone watching at home has the same feeling. Something is wrong. His timing is still there, his instincts still function. But he is audibly struggling. You can hear him working for breath between lines. You can see him concentrating on staying upright in a way that has nothing to do with comedy. He gets through it. The audience loves him. The show runs to completion. And when it is over, Chris Farley enters the final chapter of his life. The descent that follows the last SNL broadcast is not a sudden collapse. It is a slow, specific, documented unraveling over 54 days in the city of Chicago. He parties across the city. Different clubs, different bars, different people, drinking, cocaine, heroin. The same combination that killed his hero 15 years before him in a different city in a different hotel room, and the parallel is so exact, it feels impossible, except it isn't, because it is happening, and the people who love him can see it happening, and none of them can stop it. On Monday the 15th of December, a friend visits, Tim Alley, and Chris has news, real news, a film offer, a dramatic role. Written by David Mamet about the silent film comedian Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, a man who, like Farley, was beloved for his physical comedy and destroyed by forces larger than his talent. Chris is crying when he describes it. There's this movie and he wants me to play the lead. It's very important that I do it. I won't be the clown anymore. I get to play a dramatic role. The offer is real. The role is real. The path out of being the fat funny guy, the escape from the persona that has been slowly consuming him, is sitting right there on the table. But there is a condition. He has to stay sober for 2 years before production begins. And Chris Farley, weeping, tells his friend the truth. That's his big fear. I can't do it. I can't stay sober for 2 years. The next morning, he starts with vodka and weed at 8:25 in the morning. In the early hours of Wednesday, the 17th of December, Chris Farley calls a woman named Heidi Hauser, an escort. He asks her to come clubbing with him. When she arrives, she asks how long he has been awake. He thinks about it, maybe 3 or 4 days. He isn't sure. He genuinely cannot tell. They go out, they come back, they go to his apartment at the John Hancock Center, and somewhere in the early hours of Thursday morning, Chris starts behaving strangely. He yells. He pounds his chest, slapping himself again and again, and telling Heidi when she asks him to stop, "It's the heroin. It makes me act this way. I couldn't do Saturday Night Live without it." What the doctors will later explain is that the cocaine in his system is likely causing his coronary arteries to spasm. The chest pounding is the physical expression of what his heart is doing under the pressure of what he has put into his body. But to Heidi, it looks like a quirk, not a medical emergency. At around 3 in the morning on Thursday the 18th of December, Heidi asks to leave. Chris tries to change her mind. He says to her, and these are the last words Chris Farley will ever speak to another human being, "Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me." He falls asleep. Heidi takes a photograph of him sleeping, thinks she'll show it to him later. Then she leaves. Later that morning, Chris's brother John arrives at the apartment and finds him in the entryway. He calls the Chicago police. Under Chris's body, they find a foil packet containing a white powder. The toxicology report confirms what everyone already knew: cocaine and morphine, the byproduct of heroin in his blood. He has been asked in an interview from around this period about his love life. He says he has someone. She lifts him up when he is sad. She is always there for him. She will never betray him. The interviewer asks what her name is. Chris looks straight at them. Heroin. Chris Farley died of a combination of heroin and cocaine. Exactly what killed John Belushi. On the 18th of December, 1997, he was 33 years old. At the funeral, Adam Sandler speaks, Chris Rock speaks. People who loved him say the things that people say when someone leaves too soon. But there is one moment that contains the whole story. At the end of the service, Chris's father, this big man, this dominant presence, the man whose laugh was the most golden feeling in the world to his son, stands up. He walks to the casket. He reaches around it with both arms. And he holds on. He will not let go. Chris Farley spent his entire life trying to make his father laugh, trying to earn the approval of a man who loved him, and also by the complicated calculus of fathers and sons made him feel that love had to be performed for, earned, demonstrated. And in that final image, the father who raised the funniest man of his generation holding onto a box because there is nothing else left to hold on to. The whole story is there. The nuns who told Mrs. Farley that the children were laughing at Christopher, not with him, they were right. And they were wrong. Because in the end, it turned out to be both. And Chris Farley never figured out how to tell the difference. He was not, as David Spade once told him, trying to be like someone else. He was exactly himself. His openness, his generosity, his need to give everyone in the room a piece of his soul, these were not performances. They were him. Adam Sandler said it best. When Farley walked into a room, that was it. Within 20 seconds of seeing him perform, you got a piece of his soul. Every single person in the audience got a piece of his soul. And he kept giving it away, piece by piece, to anyone who needed it. And when there was nothing left, he went looking for something to fill the space. He found the wrong thing. At his final SNL performance in between takes, with the oxygen tanks just out of frame and Chris Rock waiting in the wings, someone tells him he can do it. And Chris Farley, sweating, struggling to breathe, 33 years old and 54 days from the end, looks up. Yeah, he says, "I got it." If you've made it to the end of this video, you already know this channel isn't about nostalgia. It's about what comedy costs the people who make it, the real stories, the ones that don't get told in anniversary specials or greatest hits compilations. If you haven't watched our video on the full cocaine years of Saturday Night Live, the complete story of Belushi, Garrett Morris, Gilda Radner, and the era that nearly destroyed the show entirely, that goes deeper into the world that shaped everything Chris Farley became, link is below. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this with someone who cares about these stories. Because Chris Farley mattered, not because of the Chippendale sketch, not because of Matt Foley, but because within 20 seconds of seeing him, you saw a person's whole heart. That doesn't happen very often.